Follow me. Follow me. Tuesday, September 11, 2012. In Benghazi, Libya, a city that had been a hotbed of violence for months, chaos erupted once again. A major uprising was carried out by armed rebels fully equipped with heavy weapons. Their main target was the United States Consulate, which had long been considered a major obstacle by the rebel groups. Inside the building, Ambassador Christopher Stevens and his security team faced a terrifying situation. In fact, their refuge became a deadly target in the midst of the chaos. Meanwhile, a small group of 6 private security contractors, almost all former members of the elite U.S. Special Forces, became the last line of defense. Despite the extreme danger, they bravely charged into the midst of the siege. While bullets rained down and attacks from armed enemies came one after another, they did everything they could to carry out a desperate rescue mission. In this video, we will examine the complex events in Benghazi, going beyond what was shown in the movie 13 Hours, The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi by Michael Bay. We will not glorify war or oversimplify the reality of battle. Instead, our goal is to understand the real events, their causes, their consequences, and what was actually needed, the experiences of those at the forefront of the tragedy. But before we start, if you're new to our channel, please subscribe so you'll always be updated with videos like this. To understand the tragedy that happened in Benghazi in 2012, we first need to look back at history. The diplomatic presence of the United States in Libya has been unstable since 1972, reflecting the intense political tension between the two countries during the leadership of Muammar Gaddafi. When the Libyan civil war broke out, the United States supported the rebels fighting against Gaddafi. After he was ousted in 2011, Barack Obama's administration began steps to help Libya transition to a democratic government. Amid this dangerous and chaotic situation, Ambassador Christopher Stevens was tasked with leading the reopening of the United States' diplomatic presence in the country. However, diplomacy was not the only reason for America's interest in Libya. The country's strategic location also had a significant influence, as well as concerns about the vast number of weapons left behind after the fall of Muammar Gaddafi's regime. Ambassador Stevens was well aware of the grave danger, but he continued his mission to stabilize the situation and monitor security in Libya despite clear warnings. These included previous attacks and direct threats. Furthermore, the facility in Benghazi did not have the same level of protection as a permanent embassy. The decision to keep Stevens and his team in Benghazi despite security warnings would become a critical factor by September 2012. At that time, Benghazi was the center of rebel violence and illegal arms trading. It's not surprising that the attention of armed groups would turn to that building, which lacked security and had an American flag flying. While Christopher Stevens continued to request additional security from Tripoli, former Navy SEAL Glenn Doherty reached out to his colleagues at the CIA Global Response Staff, or GRS. The GRS is a group of private military contractors stationed at a secret CIA annex in Benghazi, located near the temporary United States Consulate. At that time, the GRS was composed of former Navy SEALs Jack Silva and Tyrone Woods, former Marines John Tigan, known as Tig, Mark Geist, known as Oz, and Dave Benton, known as Boone. They were also joined by former Army Ranger Chris Paranto. These 6 men underwent some of the toughest military training and had extensive experience in battlefield operations. On the night of September 11, 2012, Ambassador Christopher Stevens retired early after a long day of meetings with the Turkish consul. Around 9:40 in the evening, Ambassador Christopher Stevens was awakened by a series of gunshots. A large number of armed rebels had already entered the consulate grounds, carrying various weapons. Among their weapons were RPGs, grenades, and other heavy arms. Through the security cameras, Agent Alex Henderson monitored the rapid advance of the attackers. Along with his warning to the entire United States system about the imminent danger, An emergency alert also went out to the CIA Global Response Staff, at the Diplomatic Security Command Center, and even at the Pentagon. However, the response received by the operators at the CIA Annex was extremely disappointing. Their leader's order was to stay in their current position. This directive became one of the most controversial parts of the Benghazi incident, and to this day, opinions about it still differ. The situation worsened when the Libyan February 17 Martyrs Brigade, the local force assisting with the Consulate's security, was ordered not to carry out any military intervention. Because of this, the Consulate staff were left without immediate support from outside. Just a few minutes later, the rebels managed to destroy the main entrance of the building. Although they were stopped by the iron bars on the doors and windows, the fire quickly spread to different parts of the building as the rebels continued to attack the consulate. Inside the consulate, Ambassador Stevens clung to his last hope of survival. Desperately, he contacted his superiors and pleaded for the GRS to be allowed to leave and rescue them. But again, the answer was negative. By 10 p.m., the tension was almost unbearable. Every second of waiting only put the lives of those inside the consulate, including the ambassador, in even greater danger. After almost 30 minutes of waiting for a rescue order that never came, Tyron Woods, the head of the GRS team, faced the toughest decision of his career. He decided to act on his own judgment, even without official permission from the White House or the CIA. He carefully planned the rescue mission and the safest route to safety. After 10 minutes, they set off in their Toyota Land Cruisers toward the battle site, but their journey was not easy. The streets were full of roadblocks, checkpoints, and armed rebels. When they realized they could be discovered at any moment, the group decided to split up and continue the mission on foot as they went deeper into the dark and dangerous city. Meanwhile, inside the burning consulate, Ambassador Christopher Stevens and Sean Smith hid in a bathroom, hoping to find at least some protection from the fire and smoke. Meanwhile, a security agent took position on the roof to gain a better tactical advantage. From there, he witnessed a horrifying scene. The building was being consumed by flames while the rebels continued firing from different directions. At a critical moment in the night, a glimmer of hope arrived. The rescue team had arrived. Chris Peranto was first to charge the front lines. He used grenades to create a diversion in the consulate courtyard. Dave Benton took advantage of the opportunity to provide suppressive fire against the attackers. Everything quickly turned into an intense firefight. The rebels repeatedly fired RPGs and automatic weapons, but the GRS members fought back with full force. They succeeded in taking down several RPG operators. This gave them a brief opportunity to get inside the building. The rescue team went in to look for the consulate staff, but they could hardly see anything because of the thick smoke. The heat inside the building was almost like an oven. After the desperate search, a heartbreaking scene unfolded before them. They found the lifeless body of Sean Smith, one of the staff. He was with diplomatic security. Around 11 p.m., the situation became even more serious when a drone flew overhead, sending live video to the commanders in Washington. President Barack Obama, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and their officials watched the events unfold as the crisis worsened. Meanwhile, hundreds of kilometers away from Benghazi, former Navy SEAL Glenn Doherty, who was in Tripoli at the time, made a dangerous but brave decision. Racing against time, he offered $30,000 to convince a commercial pilot to immediately fly him to Benghazi. He had only one goal: to join his comrades in the toughest battle of their lives. As midnight approached, the GRS operators successfully killed or drove back many rebels and evacuated 5 people from the besieged consulate. However, Ambassador Christopher Stevens remained missing. Due to the imminent large-scale counterattack by the rebels and with no other options left, the rescue team was forced to retreat and return to the CIA Annex. They loaded the rescued personnel along with the lifeless body of Sean Smith into an armored vehicle, a vehicle that became extremely important to their survival due to the intense danger they were facing. Their destination was only about 1.5 kilometers away, but Along that short route, they were met with intense gunfire and the explosion of a grenade. Fortunately, their Toyota Land Cruiser was not hit badly. Because of its thick armor plating, they were saved from certain danger, and if it had been an ordinary vehicle, it would have likely been riddled with bullets. By 11:50 p.m., the GRS team made it back to the CIA Annex, even though 2 of their tires were flat and the underside of their vehicle was almost destroyed. But the nightmare of that night was not yet over. In fact, an even greater challenge awaited them. As midnight approached, the CIA Annex in Benghazi became the center of another intense assault, with the compound being fired upon using rifles, machine guns, PKM machine guns, RPG launchers, and mortars. Despite the intensity of the attack, the security team was ready, each member positioned in their designated defensive spot, allowing them to immediately carry out their defense plan. However, the strength of the rebels' offensive was beyond what they expected. Later, Chris Paronto shared his experience in that battle. As the attackers got closer, he aimed at them using the infrared laser of his M4 rifle. He kept hearing the words over the radio, "I've got him, I've got him, I've got him now," again and again. For him, each of those confirmations meant that another enemy had been killed. Paronto also admitted that the movie 13 Hours, The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi, accurately portrayed the feeling of relentless attacks by wave after wave of rebels on the compound. Meanwhile, while the GRS operators were defending the CIA Annex, Glenn Doherty arrived at Benghazi Airport. However, he was delayed for a long time due to military and bureaucratic issues before he finally reached the CIA Annex to help rescue the survivors. The fighting continued in successive clashes until dawn. Around 5 in the morning, the attack intensified even more. Mortar rounds then landed inside the compound. Many were seriously injured and some were killed, including personnel from the U.S. State Department and members of the GRS security team. Amidst the chaos, Glenn Doherty was informed that his close friend and former Navy SEAL teammate Tyrone Woods was on the roof of the building and was continuing to defend their position. Doherty didn't hesitate. He immediately went up to join and support his friend in the midst of the offensive, but just moments later, both of them were hit by a mortar round. That explosion took their lives. After that attack, only a few were left who could still fight. Only 3 or 4 people were still able to use their weapons. The others were either wounded or had already fallen in battle. Later, Chris Paronto received a report that an armed militia was approaching. According to the information, about 30 to 50 fighters were approaching, riding on what are called technicals, civilian vehicles modified to carry machine guns or other heavy weapons. It wasn't clear if they were allies or new enemies. At that point, the GRS had very little defense left. They only had their M4 rifles, while many of their comrades, including Dave Benton, had already been wounded. It was almost impossible to prevent another large-scale attack. Amidst the intense tension, Chris Paronto peeked out from his hiding place and focused his gaze on one of the approaching trucks. He tried to determine if the driver was the leader of the group. He noticed that the man was chewing cat, a plant commonly used in some countries as a stimulant to stay alert and gain extra energy, especially before a battle. In a moment filled with doubt, Chris Paronto chose to rely on the possibility of understanding rather than immediately opening fire. As a sign of peaceful intention, he made a shaka hand gesture, a simple hand movement commonly used by surfers as a symbol of friendship and good intentions. In that context, the shaka gesture served as a test of intention, a simple act that could be seen as a threat or as a sign of friendship. To the great relief of those at the CIA Annex, the other side also smiled and returned the same gesture. That wasn't a scene from a movie, but a real moment of understanding that temporarily defused the situation. As the intense tension subsided, reinforcements arrived, not to escalate the fighting, but to help the survivors amid the chaos. In a convoy of heavy vehicles, the CIA personnel, members of the Global Response Staff, and other U.S. State Department employees were evacuated to an airport in Tripoli. Meanwhile, the head of the CIA Annex, Bob, who had previously refused to allow the GRS to immediately assist the consulate, was also the one who requested a plane for the evacuation of the wounded and other employees. According to Chris Paronto, if it weren't for that action, there could have been more victims. However, in just 13 hours, the GRS lost 2 of their comrades, Tyrone Woods and Glenn Doherty. In total, the Special Forces successfully rescued around 30 people, including personnel from the U.S. State Department. Later on, Ambassador Christopher Stevens' fate also became known. During the height of the attack, he was found by some Libyans and brought to a hospital while he was in critical condition. According to the doctor who examined him, he died due to asphyxiation caused by severe smoke inhalation, and not because of gunshot wounds. After the incident, the United States sent 50 Marines from the anti-terrorism security team and deployed 2 warships to patrol the coast of Libya. But for many, it was already too late. Because of this, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and President Barack Obama faced intense criticism, especially for the government's allegedly slow response to the ongoing crisis. Until now, some aspects of the incident remain the subject of debate. One of the biggest controversies is whether the CIA really ordered the 6 GRS operators to stay put while the attack on the consulate was happening. This is also the version presented in the book that became the basis for the movie 13 Hours, The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi. According to journalist Mitchell Zokoff, such an order was indeed given, and this was also confirmed by Chris Tanto Paronto in an interview. According to him, there is no exaggeration here. We were clearly ordered not to act. Those were exactly the words used. It's hard to ignore the testimony of the people who were actually there. However, some officials and high-ranking CIA personnel strongly denied that such an order was given. Another detail that is often debated is the lack of air support. In the movie, it is implied that air support could have arrived but was not sent. However, according to reports on September 11, 2012, there were actually no combat aircraft or armed drones that could reach Benghazi in time to change the course of the battle. Therefore, the lack of immediate air support was more due to time and location constraints rather than simple negligence by United States officials. Despite some dramatic scenes and creative additions by director Michael Bay, 13 Hours, The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi remains one of the films that provides a broad picture of the real events that took place that night. The attack in Benghazi remains one of the saddest and most serious tragedies experienced by United States diplomacy in modern times. In the following years, the operations of the U.S. Embassy in Libya were almost completely shut down. Until now, the current ambassador of the United States to Libya performs his duties from another country instead of being permanently assigned inside Libya itself. After the incident, some of the real operators of Benghazi, including Chris Paronto, Mark Geist, and John Tig Teagan, served as technical advisors for the movie 13 Hours, The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi. Because of this, many details in the movie are based directly on their own first-hand experiences. However, according to the creator of the video, there were some very important events that were not shown in the movie. This may be due to time constraints, the way the story was told in the movie, or decisions made during script writing. But those details are important to fully understand what really happened in Benghazi. If you want to know the full story from the people who actually experienced it, the author of the video has included interviews with Mark Geist, Chris Tanto Paronto, and John Tig Teagan in the description. Although these interviews are in English, they can help you gain a clearer and deeper perspective about the real events that happened. This is where our discussion ends. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our upcoming releases. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.